Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Holy Paladin on the Battle for Azeroth Alpha. Now, if you guys have followed the channel for any extended period of time, you would know that the Holy Paladin has, and was my main for about, I don't know, maybe like 10 years. Started playing Holy Paladin at the end of Classic, didn't really start playing it properly until Wrath, but it was my main through TBC and then again in Wrath, so onward all the way up until Tomb of Sargeras, until I switched to tanking for raiding, that is, and that of course was when I became a Blood DK, so the rest is living in infamy now. But anyway, the thing that I find most interesting about Holy Paladin has always been their bulk and flexibility. Of course, we talked a lot about this in the tier list that we made. Currently they are, currently in Legion, that is, incredibly bulky. Really doesn't seem like there's any departure here, and frankly, I would say that Holy Paladin is essentially, I mean, there's almost no changes. Again, I don't really follow it too heavily. I'd like to say I play Holy Paladin well, but frankly, I would say I don't. Realistically, I do not. And in this video, you're certainly going to see me play it poorly. So the big reason, of course, is I have to really bring this up whenever I'm playing a healer in these videos, is I'm playing a healer completely differently than I would on live. On live, I would use an add-on called Voodoo, an add-on that's allowing me to click the spells, like click through the spells onto the bar, or onto the cast, the target, that is. So I would click a warrior with the right click, and it would heal me, heal with like Holy Light, left click, Flashlight, middle click, Holy Shock, etc. So I've had to completely rebind using mouse over macros to be able to make this work. And yeah, it's not easy, I have to tell you. There's so many times, it doesn't happen as much as it used to in these videos, but yeah, there's so many times where I go full muscle memory panic mode, and I'm like pressing buttons that don't even exist anymore, or pressing buttons that yeah, are completely bound differently. So anyway, that's that. But yeah, Holy Paladin really hasn't changed on the Battle for Azeroth Alpha. That's probably an indication that something will happen eventually. We got a really cool new animation for Holy Light, and that's about it. But there's a couple of big things that I want to talk about today. That's one is the role of the healer in dungeons. All right, I'm going to talk about, take a more of a meta approach, like more like not necessarily about the healer itself, but more about healers in general and how I think Holy Paladin fits in. So of course, if you follow the tier list that I've made recently, especially the healing ones, and you know, just in general, I say Holy Paladin has a lot of bulk, very survivable. Even with the artifact being removed, they do lose some of their survivability thanks to the artifact. But something like Diva Aura, naturally, something like you know, the Divine Purpose, and of course Bubble, I was always going to make them, have more bulk than your average healer. And now they've dramatically reduced the bulk of a lot of healers in this expansion, and one of them is most notably Resto Druid. They're reducing bear form. Basically, all non-tank druids are getting a significantly less benefit from bear form. Now, this, of course, is a whole topic for another video, and not even, you know, who knows, maybe they'll change it at any moment. But I would say that leaves Holy Paladin then as the undisputed king of bulk of any situation where they need to reduce damage. I think Holy Paladin is still the best, thanks to, you know, talent that is going to reduce you know, multiple defensives for them. Just being plate in general, a lot of quick abilities they have that can get them and others up really helps a lot. So I think in general, Holy Paladin is going to remain one of the strongest, you know, bulky healers, the healers that are going to be able to survive the most, and that is almost entirely because of not absorbs, of course. Why did I just say that? Immunities. That's what I'm trying to say. Any healer that had an immunity would be incredibly potent. Obviously, as the healer, you're often in just as much danger as the tank, and sometimes it's very difficult to balance that, especially with the Holy Paladin healing model. So everything else appears to be identical. Really, I'd say the artifact for Holy Paladin does not affect them in dungeons very heavily, especially not compared to other healers. I think it was, you know, very important for raiding, and of course, there's a couple key points to the artifact. But yeah, realistically, not missing a ton here, Holy Paladin is. So they're playing identical, and of course, like I said, I'm struggling to play them well. But one thing I do notice is it does feel like maybe the stats, or, you know, based on like crit or something like that, I'm not really sure, but it does feel like I am healing for very little. I mean, comparatively, like, look at this. I mean, you can see the numbers on the screen. The log is going to be in the description. It's going to be linked to a very specific fight, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, it feels like I'm doing very little healing, especially compared to the health of this tank. I mean, I'm seeing 3,000 or under on pretty much every cast. I don't know. I've yet to properly compare the healers, but after playing Discipline Priest and Resto Shaman quite a lot, I think Holy Paladin is kind of just a notch behind. Now here you're going to see me do something a little diabolical. I try to, I basically, I wouldn't say I convince anybody, but I just sit back here healing, like if I need extra time. I'm actually waiting for wing CDs. And that is going to take us directly into the next topic that we're going to be discussing here. The next niche of Holy Paladin in Legion is their damage, okay? Very big deal, healer being able to do damage. Now in this dungeon, I'm going to see some pretty poor results, frankly. Of course, a lot of this is because I'm playing the class so poorly that I'm struggling to balance both. Honestly, this was the biggest thing that kind of drove me away from healers in Legion. I really struggled to balance both, and I think it's not as easy as, like, basically I think the healer has the hardest job in 5-mans. And even Holy Paladin, who could do their burst so vividly, it's such a big burst window, you know, especially with the talents and all the options that Holy Paladin has. I still struggle, you know, pretty mightily, honestly. And you can see the logs as a pretty clear indicator of this. This fight is actually, I don't know, it seems weird. This dungeon is probably the best dungeon to test this on. But frankly, I'm surprised at how much healing I actually have to do for normal. Of course, we are, you know, not over gearing anything. Everything's going to be scaled. But, I mean, this warrior, I have to say, I think he was, I don't know, it's hard to quantify. It seems like he's taking a lot more damage than he should be on a lot of these situations. But then at the same time, looks like we all are. So, I don't know, I think it's most noticeable because I'm trying my best to do damage. Whereas if I was playing, say, the Resto Shaman or even Disc Priest, I would kind of be focusing on healing first and damage second. This character, I went into the dungeon with the pure mindset of, let's see how much burst Holy Paladin does on the Battle for Azeroth Alpha. And I don't know, the answer is difficult to find because, of course, I'm having to heal a lot more than I feel like I should have to on a boss like this. And it's pretty hectic. But, yeah, realistically, I don't expect to... it feels like it's taking quite long, too. This group was not the best, I guess I could put it that way. Especially with my damage. I don't know. It seems like a really long encounter. But anyway, the damage itself is not impressive to me. And this is because of a couple nerfs that have appeared to have occurred. Of course, we're going to lose some damage just because of the artifact. I think that's probably the source of the biggest loss. I mean, it may not be. Some of you guys out there maybe play Holy Paladin more than I, and especially in 5-mans, you could let me know. But realistically, I think the biggest nerfs come in the factor of spell power coefficient nerfs that have happened to both Holy Shock and Crusader Strike. Judgment doesn't appear to have been affected, but I didn't have a hard look at it. What I did look at was Holy Shock, especially, and frankly, Consecrate as well seems to have been given a massive nerf. Now, again, not exactly sure about that one, but Holy Shock definitely 100%. So on live, you'd look at the coefficients, and it would be pretty equal. They would do a pretty equal amount of damage and healing, the Holy Shock, that is. It would heal for a little bit more than it would do damage, but in general, the spell and the coefficient itself was pretty balanced. But now on the Battle for Azeroth Alpha, it's about halved. It's not, you know, it's the coefficient itself was halved, so the damage and healing isn't going to be halved. But yeah, in terms of damage, it's going to do, I'd say only about maybe 2/3 or maybe realistically 3/4 of the damage that it might heal. And that not necessarily a problem. Of course, Holy Paladin is really bursty, but that really makes up a big deal. Now, the other thing that I'm noticing here is it feels like Holy Shock isn't up as often. And of course, we have no Bloodlust in the group, so it's difficult to quantify. A lot of my situations with Holy Paladin have always been in situations where we're just popping Lust, burning through a boss. Bosses are taking a little bit longer, so it kind of feels a little bit weaker. And of course, I have no SCADA, you know, no real-time damage meter on the screen, so I can't actually see my burst. That's really how I would quantify Holy Paladin. I would say that they don't necessarily do the best damage over the course of 5 minutes, but in the course of that, you know, 40-second, maybe 30-second window there, they're going to do more healing, more damage than any other healer is ever going to be able to put out. I would realistically say that's probably still the case on the alpha, even though the numbers seem a bit low. Realistically, I'm doing a lot less damage than the tank, and that guy, I don't think he's playing very well, so that is kind of worrying. But I do, like I said in the description, I have the parse linked from this kind of like, it's like a Tortolan mini boss. He's on right before the arena boss there. I think that's probably the best example. It's a short enough encounter, an encounter that I feel like there's very little wasted time. I'm pretty sure I have wings up for the entirety of it, and it's a good pull. Like, nobody requires much healing. So that's kind of how it should go in, you know, a lot of Mythic Plus, especially the medium keys that I would do in Legion. we'd have a situation where as long as in my burst window nobody needs massive amount of healing, I could do an enormous amount of damage, where I'd be seeing like maybe like, you know, close to 2 million burst, and that's as a pretty undergeared Holy Paladin. So pretty satisfied with that. Right now it seems like I'm doing, yeah, about like I did on that fight a little bit over one. I think it was like 1.5K. I was getting close to that, and who knows how much of that was burst. It's difficult to analyze that on the log. Well, actually, it's probably not difficult, but I'm just inept at it. So anyway, I definitely think Holy Paladin is probably still going to reign supreme in the damage category. It's difficult to like I said, difficult to quantify right now, especially without some type of real-time damage tracker. I'm not super skilled at the logs. If someone is, and you could tell me maybe a little bit more about during the burst window how much DPS I actually did, that would be way better, way more interesting to me than anything else. So I'm sure I could figure it out myself. But anyway, the dungeon space is quite slow. It's difficult to you know, to say how successful the Paladin damage was because of that. You know, it didn't. I feel like I should really be contributing a lot more to this dungeon than I am, as the damage element and the healing element doesn't feel any stronger than it should be either. So for me, I'm I'm not as impressed with Holy Paladin as I hoped to have been. Let's put it this way: this was actually the first dungeon that I did and fully completed as a Holy Paladin. And it kind of, I don't know, it kind of makes me want something more. But I think the big problem, you know, really the true strength of Holy Paladin is the fact that they're so bulky and they could do so much burst healing. And I don't really find that, like I don't play to the strength in that in this dungeon. There's no bulk scenarios whatsoever. I don't really ever even take significant portions of damage. At no point do I ever feel like I need to bubble or I need to do something specific. I think I do actually bubble by accident at some point. But realistically, there's never any danger coming to the healer. Yet this tank is getting his ass kicked the whole dungeon, and I'm struggling to heal him up. Now, again, that's definitely like a good portion of it is because of my ineptitude. It's really difficult to get used to healing on this new setup. Like I said, just using mouse over macros here instead of the click-through add-ons like Voodoo. But yeah, I don't know, man. Really, it's not any different. So I'm not sure why I feel so weak. It could be, you know, it could be the tank. Could be. I think I definitely look at Warrior's model as kind of like a swing model. I'd like to cover Warrior soon, and maybe that'll be this week. But yeah, Warrior's model does feel like it's kind of in a weird state right now. They changed Ignore Pain to be this really bizarre thing. We'll talk about this in a different video, but really bizarre thing, and I don't know how it's going to play in dungeons. I think it's either going to be ridiculous or really bad, honestly. So I'm kind of already leaning towards bad just because it feels like this guy's taking a lot of damage, but then you compare the log, and you know, on this fight he actually takes 1.1k damage per second. Now that seems like a lot, but there's 2 targets. I don't know. One way that I really struggle keeping this guy up and doing anything that's other than healing the whole time. And you know, this is the situation here. I mean, you're going to see this in every element of the game now. You can't, you know, if you can't balance the DPS and the healing properly, you're not going to be a very good healer. And this is pretty much the main reason why I kind of lost love for healing in Legion. I want to be the best healer I can be, but it's really difficult, man. Like, compared to being the best tank I can be, it's nothing. Like, the best tank, all I got to do, especially as Blood DK, make sure I'm maximizing the healing and keeping up my defenses as much as possible. And then I could just focus on damage. But as healing, it's, you know, the job changes every time we do a dungeon. Every different group, every different comp, every different tank, every different encounter. Like, look at that. You know, people are getting spanked by these mechanics that should be dodgeable. So that means I'm going to do less damage. Means I'm going to have to focus more. Means I'm going to have to put more effort in. And of course, as you see here, I don't put that effort in. But ironically, this has happened a couple times now where the tank dies and the rest of the group is actually easier to keep up than the tank, which I don't really know what to say about that. I think at this point, obviously, there's only the one mob left and people are kind of playing a little bit more spread out, so they're not making any mistakes, don't end up wiping here. But yeah, realistically, I'm having less trouble keeping this Fury or this Arms Warrior up than the actual tank. So I don't know. It's a whole weird situation. But anyway, the crux of the topic here is that really Holy Paladin hasn't changed from a healing perspective. They still have very strong burst healing. Holy Shock appears to, for me, I feel like I'm not critting at all. And of course, you know, we're scaled down massively. This is on like a character that I basically have no say over my stats on. So who knows? Who knows what's going to be different? But that was my biggest thing. It was like, man, my heals feel really weak. Flashlight even, you know, Holy Shock is doing fine healing, obviously, but like the filler heals, the actual casted heals feel very weak. I didn't really get much use out of Light of the Martyr. Maybe I should have spent a little bit more time trying it. I don't know. It's just like on Legion, you know, when say like everybody goes to 50%, I pop Virtue, hit him with the Holy Shock and a Flashlight, everybody's topped off. In here, it's like I have to literally cast like 15 globals to top this tank off. So I don't know. I'm not really sure. Like, I don't know. It's a weird situation, let's put it that way. But I think you could see, you know, the evidence is on the screen. Also in the log, you could check it out. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's the class. Maybe it's something I'm missing. Very likely, it could be something I'm missing. But realistically, I still favor Holy Paladin. I still like them. If push came to shove, the day to choose a healer came, I probably wouldn't play a Holy Paladin. Like, if we always talk about this, people are like, "Oh, you're gonna stay tank for raids." I was gonna play tanks in 5-mans. That was gonna be my favorite role for 5-mans. But people are like, "Yeah, you know what? You want to go back to healing?" Because I healed, like I said, from in the guild, like, as an officer, as a GM of a leader of a guild. I healed from Wrath of the Lich King all the way to Legion, about halfway through, about a quarter of the way through Legion, realistically. So, you know, it's pretty logical that I'd go back to healing someday. And if I ever did that, who knows? I don't really intend to do it. I don't really want to do it at this point. I've gotten comfortable with tanking. I don't love raid tanking, but I love dungeon tanking, so that's the big thing. But anyway, if I ever did go back, I think I'd probably play something else at this point. My Paladin has been through the ringer. It's a lot of changes. Really, I still don't really like the changes that it came. It's really the mastery. I really was favoring the WoD playstyle of Holy Paladin. Not really a lot has changed, but I don't know. I don't really like this kind of like this whole pop and drop. Like, you know, you got to like put everything into these few globals to maximize in a raid, like especially with sacrifice or whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't like that. I don't really like the playstyle. I don't really like having to like time up all these massive burst healings to get massive blanketing. It just doesn't really fun. It doesn't strike me as fun. And I think I'd much rather, if I was going to play in raids again, of course, a healer, I would probably play a Resto Shaman. I definitely, you know, for 5-mans, I'm still really itching at Discipline. It seems really nice. And now comparing the damage I'm doing here to Discipline, though, it makes me worry a little bit. The one thing that I am definitely really dissatisfied with Paladin is Consecrate's damage. As you can see in the log, it is doing very little damage on AoE, and still melee is still doing so much more damage, and that almost feels like the deciding factor between this and Discipline. It makes me confused how it's even possible that the classes could be this balanced when melee is doing so much damage. And I don't know if this is, it's not, I don't think it's a bug. I think it's intended. It feels like every class in the game, it's this way, one way or the other. So it could be like, you know, it's going to be tuned probably at some point. But the thing that, you know, it's not like a bug with the log or something like that. Like the top thing for every spec is melee, pretty much. Even for these Fury Warriors, like take a look at the melee that they're doing. We have 2 Fury Warriors. We have 4 melee, effectively, including myself. So you see a lot of melee damage, and it makes me want to just try like a 1 to 60 no, like melee only. Like, honestly, I kind of wish I could make a level 1 on this realm, because I would be interested in trying that to just see how overpowered auto attacks are at low levels, because as of right now it feels absolutely absurd. And I don't know if that's some type of compensation for the loss of the artifact, but yeah, anyway, so here's the fight. As you see, I pretty much don't do much healing. I mean, I do a little bit, I guess, a couple wasted globals on healing, but fight's relatively short. It's just a mini boss, and I'm putting pretty much every Holy Shock into the boss. So you're going to see in the log, I think I did, I think it was like over 1K for sure. It might have been closer to 1.5. I can't actually remember now, but yeah, so this is really the best chance to take a look at it. So yeah, Holy Shock, obviously it's going to do your best. It's going to be your best spell damage, but you can actually see there, even on that log, melee is doing a lot, and this is even with a one-hander. So I don't really know what would be different if I still had a two-hander. There's no current, like, I can't get a two-hander that has intellect on it, to my knowledge, so I can't actually try that. I don't know if they intend on anybody using two-handers anymore. It does seem a bit weird. We won't actually be able to transmog our artifact. If that's the case, I don't know, whatever. That's a whole different problem. I'm not an RPer, I hate to say it, but that kind of stuff doesn't really affect me, but it does seem kind of strange that you would give the artifact two-hander and then back to one-handed shield. But let me get this straight. I totally prefer one-handed shield visually. It looks way better, and I've always kind of identified Holy Paladin as like a shield wearing healer. So anyway, what else? What else? I don't know. Holy Paladin feels good, and it doesn't, like I said, almost no difference, almost no changes whatsoever. I struggle with it though. I don't know. I'm not really sure what the difference is here, but yeah. So I would definitely want to see the future of Holy Paladin. Like I said, they nerfed the damage pretty substantially, a very sizable damage nerf, but still, thanks to the melees, it feels like I'm still doing more damage than I should be. And it's hard to, like I said, it's really difficult to see when you don't have the burst on screen, just because, you know, that's really what matters for Holy Paladin, and really for any healer. It's all about how much the effective globals that you're getting in as damage are helping the dungeon. Like, you know, if you're doing very high damage, like very high DPS, but you're not ever healing, and your group is dying, then it's like wasted, you know? So it's like those globals where you actually have to heal are mitigated by the globals where you can damage. And that's really why Holy Paladin is so good, right? Because they could literally burst higher than actual damage dealers in Legion. And it doesn't even really require that much effort. Like, I'm able to do it easily, and I don't play the character as a main at all. Like, I'm sure with proper relics, proper trinkets, proper setup, I mean, I've seen logs of people actually doing like multiple millions of damage as a Holy Paladin. You know what I mean? So I think that's pretty substantial, I have to say. And it's not really going to be that way in a situation where you can't, like, I mean, it could be that way, but you're not going to really know it's that way unless you're properly measuring the burst of the entirety of the dungeon. Like, not only just you, but the people around you, because, you know, your window might be shortened by others. You might be wasting your window. You might be, you know, having to heal during your window, all that stuff. So I don't know. Anyway, we're finally at the end of this dungeon, and one other thing I want to talk about is the difficulty of this dungeon. I really feel like this last boss is just a big step up from any other boss in any other dungeon. He does a lot of damage and a lot of mechanics, and it is really noticeable when you're doing... look at that Warlock was up there on that freaking tower. Man, I'm talking about some weird stuff in this dungeon. Anyway, yeah, this is a really tough last stretch. I'm going to have to say that. And I think this dungeon is probably going to be one of the tougher ones for Mythic Plus. So I'm going to bring this up now just kind of as a caveat. Not a caveat, but kind of like a forewarning for the future. We're going to start... I want to start talking about dungeons more specifically instead of classes. I would like to... And this guy kept dragging him out of my Consecrate. It was so frustrating. I don't know. It's so difficult to know if Consecrate is just doing bad damage because the guy's dragging it out constantly. But I'm seeing like 53 as the ticks for Consecrate, so I have to believe it's just bad. But anyway, I want to start talking more about dungeons. I want to start analyzing pulls. I want to start looking at, especially as Blood Decay is, looking at ways that I can maximize each pull to pull, where to pot, where to use CDs, when CDs might be up, what we can multi-pull, what might be dangerous based on affixes. You know, obviously affixes are going to change, but I imagine things like bolstering, things like busting, quacking, you know, these things are still going to be in the game. So you're going to have to think about that. Even if fortified changes doesn't make trash like hugely bad on certain weeks, I think you're still going to see things like explosive, you know, so we have to think about that. And after doing this dungeon, I think it's like the 5th or 6th time I've done this dungeon now across all these different characters. I definitely think this is going to be one of the harder Mythic Pluses. It depends on mob count, definitely depends on mob count, but there's a lot of high volume trash, a lot of packs that have multiple areas that you can mess up into. But anyway, this is the boss. This is the thing that really scares me, is this boss is really difficult to avoid all of his mechanics on. So he does that mechanic. It's like kind of like a dark line. He sends out 3 of them. It's not too bad. You can just move. Here, again, you know, it just chooses a damage dealer, does these mechanics. But then he does this, like, loaded, I think it's called loaded dice mechanic. And then it starts putting it on 3 people. And then there's this ad, which, you know, who knows how that's going to affect things. Like, who knows? You know, maybe it'll bolster the boss. Who knows? But, yeah, realistically, right here is when things get absolutely insane. He sends out 3 sets of those lines, and it's just like, oh, I'm screwed. So I just bubble, and that's really, you know, I didn't need to bubble there. I just did it so I could stand still and heal everyone up. But he just keeps doing it. He's spamming it. People are getting hit multiple times by it, and it's just like, GG. I don't really know what to do about that. Obviously, maybe if I had Devo, I could have saved a life there. I don't know. I think I actually used it anyway, so... It's really a high amount of damage, and this is normal. Of course, we're scaled once again, but I don't know. I think this is going to be the hardest boss, just because it's really difficult to avoid those. Like, look at that. It's hard to avoid that, man. You have to be really far away from him to have enough space to avoid all 3 sets of those, especially if, I think it targets players. So, yeah, I think it might. I don't know. It's hard. No, I don't think it does, actually. I don't know. Either way, tough fight. So, anyway, that's it. Holy Paladin's all right. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, we will see you guys in the next one.